What's up, guys? Welcome to a very special Kind of Funny Gamescast post-show analysis of Ubisoft's Forward event, the first Forward event. We now know that there's going to be more than one, which is exciting news. As always, I'm Tim Gettys, joined by one of the coolest dudes in video games, Greg Miller.
Hello, Timothy. It does me well to be here with you.
Yeah. We also have the new face of video games, blessing Adeoye Jr.
Hello, Timothy. It does me well to be here with you.
We have Andy Cortez. How are you doing?
Hello, Timothy. It does me well to be here with you.
We also have Kevin Coelho behind the scenes, and we really appreciate it.
What did the background move again? Why did the background move again?
The last 5 minutes have been just a disaster of Kevin trying to get this all together, and he had to fix the right side of the screen to make sure it lined up, and he did that great. But now the left side's fucked up.
They must be connected in some way. You know what I mean?
You gotta love it.
Now I can't believe it's locked.
Let's get right to it, guys. Ubisoft had their first Forward event. What did we think? Greg Miller.
It's what I expected, which is good and bad all at once. I don't know. Like, it's E3. This isn't E3. This is a weird not E3, right? So to already know that you're getting Assassin's Creed Deep Dive, you already know you're getting Watch Dogs Deep Dive, and then to have obviously Far Cry 6 leak out the way it did, I think it really took any of the wind out of their sails in terms of this being what you'd expect from an E3 press conference, where you want a surprise announcement, where you want these cool things, where you want it to be more than just, hey, here's some cool shit we want to show you that you already know about and we want to talk about. And I mean, you know, shout out to them for dating Watch Dogs, dating Assassins, dating Far Cry 6. Like, I think the fact that Watch Dogs is coming this year is a little bit crazy. I think we're all prepared for that to be a 2021 game after the way it had been talked about in terms of fiscal years and stuff like that. And also then it's interesting too if that'll back up and what that'll do to being so close to Assassin's Creed. But overall, I think they showed a lot of great stuff. I think, I may be talking out of turn here. We all seem to be into the various big games they showed, obviously not so much about Tom Clancy's Elite Squad or Might and Magic Mobile. But again, this is their, hey, here's our plattering of offers. What do you guys think? And I think for their big 3 swings, and I'm not including Hyperspace, which I did think looked cool. Like when that comes to console, I will try it out and see what it's up as a battle royale. I think they did an admirable job at coming out and showing a bunch of cool games and hopefully getting you excited for them.
Bless.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty all right. Like, this is pretty much what I expected. Them showing off their big 3 games, I think makes sense. So between Watch Dogs, Assassin's Creed, and Far Cry, like all of them look good. All of them look exciting. We got dates for all of them, and so that's pretty good. Hyperscape being coming out in open beta, I think is also exciting. I wish we got more of a concrete date as far as when the game's going to come out in final release on PC and consoles. I think that would have been a more exciting thing, but maybe that's for their next Ubisoft Forward, possibly. I think the thing that kind of brings this event back for me is the fact that there is more to look forward to. Them ending this by saying, yeah, there's more to look forward to in terms of another Ubisoft Forward where we'll talk about more of our announcements. I think that softens the blow of this one a bit because there's so much that we didn't get here. Like, there wasn't really any big new game announcements at all. Which I think usually would be pretty disappointing, but if there's more to look forward to, then all right. No Beyond Good and Evil 2.
It just leaked.
Okay, that's a good point. That's a good point. That's a very good point.
Was a new announcement.
Yeah. That's a very good point. And
imagine, like, if you look at that in a vacuum, right? Of like, let's say this hadn't all leaked out, and it was that trailer started and dropped. I always say it wrong. Giancarlo. How do I say it? Giancarlo. If it dropped Giancarlo's name there, Andy would have fucking lost his mind.
Yeah.
That's a very, very good point.
That's exactly where I'm with it too. Yeah.
Continue, Bless.
Well, I was gonna say, like, there's no Beyond Good and Evil 2, which I don't think we really expected it to be here, but the fact that that game's been announced for so long, you kind of want regular updates on it. There's no Skull and Bones, which that game is probably at this point vaporware. There was no Gods and Monsters, where's that game at?
Surprise.
Yeah,
that was to me probably the biggest shock because I thought that was for sure. It's like, oh, we know the big games are going to be here. That's one of them. Like, I'm pretty surprised it wasn't here. And
there's so much stuff to where if this presentation ended and they didn't tease another Ubisoft Forward, I would have been very underwhelmed by the showing. But the fact that they're pointing to another thing softens this blow a lot. That said, like, this is very all right. Like, this is pretty much what I expected in terms of what we can get out of this thing.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what Greg and Blessing just said, I totally agree with. I think had we not had the expected Ubisoft leak that seems to happen every year, Yeah, that Giancarlo Esposito, I would have popped for that. I would have been so excited for that, and I loved Far Cry 5. I really liked Far Cry 5. I won't say I loved. I think it was like a really good 8 out of 10. I had a lot of fun with it, and I would have loved to have seen Giancarlo Esposito's name get revealed. I think that would have been really cool. But again, everything just always gets leaked. Rainbow Six Quarantine, what's the deal with that? Are we gonna? Is that something in the future that we're gonna see? Yeah, I agree with Bless. I think that sure, the future event that they have teased gives me a little bit of hope for newer franchises, but I feel like just everything is there are so few surprises. And if if it is a surprise, it's always like a smaller title that probably doesn't appeal to me. I really enjoy Hyperscape. I'm excited for the open beta. I'm excited for a lot of bad players like me to hopefully be in there to make it easier on me. Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was okay.
I mean, even Just Dance, like, where was that? Like that like there's so many games that you usually see at a Ubisoft conference that I feel like we're kind of lacking.
Bless, you would need a stage with 90 dancers.
Yes, exactly.
And it's just not possible right now.
Me and Imran had a pitch during Games Daily where they do like a Zoom like dance kind of thing where you're seeing people dance in their homes and it's like
super out of sync.
Different, super out of sync. But it's like it's bouncing from different Zoom chats. That'd be pretty cool.
I actually kind of liked the presentation of this, and I'm excited that there's going to be more of them. And I think that, this is a continuing kind of phase of the industry changing, where next year I'm very excited to see how all of the different people kind of do their E3 with a little bit more kind of understanding of smaller quarterly things. Like we see it with State of Play, we've seen it with Nintendo Direct for so long, and I think Ubisoft kind of having that can kind of give moments, so that I'd love to get to a point that we're not seeing Watch Dogs and Assassin's Creed and Far Cry all in the same show. Like maybe have each one of those headline a different Ubisoft forward that then gives a little bit more time to breathe for the Gods of Monsters or a Rayman announcement or those type of titles. For me, nothing really spoke to me from this, where it's like, as the type of gamer I am, no Rayman, there wasn't a Nintendo collaboration, and like that's fine, because I thought that they showed the games they showed off very well. And like I think that this stuff did the job of selling Valhalla, Watch Dogs, and Far Cry as much as they can right now. But it is weird where we end this. And the thing I'm most excited about is the fact that there's going to be another one. Like, I feel like that's kind of been a trend of the last couple press conferences across the industry, where it's just like, well, that was cool, but I'm more excited for the next thing. And like, everyone's telling us like, that's just a taste. We're going to get something later. And at some point, it's like, okay, but when are we actually getting the meal? Like, is that actually going to?
I don't think the meal exists anymore. Yeah, I don't think the meal exists anymore.
But it does. I mean, we just saw PlayStation give us a meal, and I know that that's their first party, but it's like I'm looking at the Xbox conference, judging this against other conferences, right? Like I do think that.
But this is more than ever. I think this year more than ever, especially with a fucked up E3, but then a console launch cycle is just, I mean, really talking about putting people in different stratospheres, where Ubisoft just has no desire / allegiance / need to do that. They want you to buy Assassin's Creed. They want you to buy Watch Dogs. They want you to know what the slate of things coming up for that launch are. Like, they want to talk about those things earlier. They want to try to get their own PR beats around it and out of it, I think.
Yeah, no, and that's what I'm saying. I think it makes sense for going forward in the future. And I think that next year, this is going to be a little bit more commonplace and we'll be used to it. But right now, we're judging it against the E3s and the press conferences of yore. And to Blessing's point, it's weird not getting the Just Dance thing. That's not saying I want that. But there is this shift right now that we're going to need to kind of get used to. But I just do. I'm excited. I'm more excited for the next one. But again, it's like, am I going to say that next time too?
I kind of wish
they won't talk about another one.
I kind of wish they teased the other one too before this, as opposed to at the end of this, because I feel like that would have helped manage expectations more. Because there was so much I was looking forward to see. Like, I know I've already listed a bunch of games, but even like Roller Champions, like, where is that at? Like, that was at what happened to it? And I mean, they announced that last year, right? Like, it's not necessarily like a thing that came and we've been waiting on forever, but it's something that would be nice to get an update to. And
it had a small beta period, but that's about it.
Yeah. And if it's not like, if you're not updating us on it today, then I don't know. I feel like you could have let off with that, as opposed to at the end of this being like, oh, and there's more. Just wait for our next event, which we're not going to give you a date for, but just know that it's later this year. I feel like that puts us in this nebulous place where it's like, all right, what level of expectation should I have for these things? Because this was cool, but this isn't what I was looking forward to
Now, being a little bit objective about it, though, I do think that while it might not be what I wanted of like, oh, hype and surprises and this, I do think it was a very solid presentation where we got release dates. Like at the end of the day, for games we already know about, that's the most important piece of the puzzle. And for 3 of their big games, we now know something that we didn't before, which is the final piece of when's it coming out. And I think that they did a good job with that, of having their 3 kind of tentpole things, especially knowing going into next gen all the way through till Q1 2021 with Far Cry 6. Like, not that it's rocket science. We've all probably could have guessed that it would be there. But to start this off now, like I want to talk about, like, Greg, what do you think about the release dates of Watch Dogs and Assassin's Creed being so close together?
I mean, I don't like it. Like, I think it's a
2 situation, right?
It's a very interesting thing where, you know, as somebody who loved Watch Dogs 2 and talked about it on all of our shows and tried to get people to run out and go play it, right? I was surprised. I didn't think they were going to make another Watch Dogs. And so then for Legion to come around and get that demo at E3 2019, right? And get to sit there. And I think it might have even been Clint, but I know we interviewed Clint and C&E, so it kind of all runs together. But to see that thing of, wow, you can take control of anybody. Wow, you can go do all these different things. I remember sitting there going, wow, that's a really cool tech. How do you wrap that into a story? How do you make that into something we care about? And what I found really interesting is, as somebody who got to play it for, I think, 3.5 hours, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, but right around 3.5 hours. Just
Where can
this
people
past
hear
week.
about that, Greg?
YouTube.com/kindoffunnygames right now. First impressions with me and Barrett are up of that, and Assassin's Creed, which we'll talk about in a second. Obviously, lengthy impressions there.
And The Last of Us 2 playthrough by me.
Yeah,
wow.
of course. Yeah,
A lot of
and
stuff over there.
Yeah,
Part
yeah.
7.
And then, yeah, of course. All of that's happening on YouTube. First impressions are on the podcast feed too. We have a First Impressions podcast feed. Go do that. However, what I was trying to drive to is sitting down and playing Watch Dogs Legion. I was shocked that in the first 10 minutes of it, they made me care. They framed the Watch Dog Legion story in a way that actually, I think the trailer did a pretty good way too, even though they make it a little bit more jokey, of why this would happen and why this would care and why not having a main character and having the resistance be this thing would make sense. The way they launched that game in terms of this giant terrorist attack on London, this thing called 0 Day, DedSec gets blamed for it. And then you see the Albion people come in and take over the thing in a time lapse. And it's very much like, I get why this would work, why suddenly you'd be wanting to turn people, why people could be on the fence and they'd waver and come help. I think then what was shocking for me was the trailer they showed everyone today seemed to drive that home. Like, Blessing, you were talking about liking it. Andy, it seemed like everybody was into it. I know, Tim, it's not your kind of game, but it seemed like people were interested to play that, right, guys?
I don't know if I will. It's going to be one of those games that I will try out and see how I feel about it, which is unfortunately the case for a lot of UB games, because I feel like it's gotten to the point where, Greg, you know that game Core that we were sponsored to do, where it's a bunch of different games in the Core engine. That's kind of what a lot of UB games remind me of. This is a third person game in our. This is a UB game, but there's Vikings, and then now this is a third person shooter, and now this is in the future, and I feel like it all starts to unfortunately look pretty samey to me.
Sure.
And as somebody who I loved fucking around with Watch Dogs 1, I never tried part 2. And I think I think I'll try this one out, but I always say that with every Assassin's Creed game too. And hopefully one of them speaks to me soon.
Yeah, I'm more excited for this Watch Dogs than I have been for the ones in the past. Like I kind of have this loop where I go through where I see the trailers for a new Watch Dog game and I'm like, okay, yeah, this looks cool. I'm into this. And then I play it and then I get probably like a couple hours in and I'm like, okay, no, this isn't for me. Me seeing what they're doing with this one and seeing kind of the systemic portions of it where it is like, okay, yeah, no, you're building a team. You can go about missions in different ways. You can, plan out your approach. You can do all these different things. But then also to see the story aspect of it kind of speak to me in a way where I'm like, okay, no, this seems cool. In the way that I feel like for a lot of previous Ubisoft games, you kind of have a flavor of political to them, but like not necessarily in like a grapple with politics. If that makes sense, like you'll have something like Division where it's like, okay, yeah, this game takes place in
which is complete bullshit.
Yeah, like this game takes place in Washington D.C. and there's all this shit going on. Or you see a game where, like Far Cry 5 where it's like, okay, yeah, like these are these white nationalists in a cult and like religion and all this different stuff. But I don't necessarily get the vibe that those games go super deep with those topics.
Yeah.
This trailer gave me the vibe that not necessarily this game is gonna go like super deep into like what protest is about and all these different stuff or like any specific like Brexit kind of thing, but I don't know. This trailer kind of sold me on the idea that this might go further than a lot of previous Ubisoft games that we've gotten. And so in both those senses, this trailer kind of spoke to me.
It seemed like that was the reaction I was seeing on Twitter as well. So back to the original question of like, what are you stacking them so close together at Assassins? I think that it's a bad move because I think, as usual, Watch Dogs isn't, in terms of breaking Ubisoft's franchises down into, AAA, AA, whatever. Like, Watch Dogs is not a AAA. It's a AAA game, but it's not a AAA franchise for them. It doesn't sell that well. It doesn't have that fan base. It doesn't do that. So I think this one would have had a better chance in the Far Cry 6 slot of, hey, put it out beginning of next year. It's a quieter time. People have their new machines installed. They want to get into something that's cool and different, yada, yada, yada. I do see this one struggling with not only the fact that you're putting it out a few weeks before Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which also was great and is very different and we'll get to, I'm sure, in a little bit. You're also right on fucking Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk's about to bear down on you as well. And so I really do feel you're going to have gamers in terms of, hey, I am a story-driven video game person. I am looking forward to getting lost into a giant world. And if you're going to be sitting there with your $60, maybe $70 to spend on these kind of games, you're going to sit there and start ranking them. And I think Assassins and Cyberpunk will be battling for that number one slot with Watch Dogs behind it.
For sure. Yeah. I think even if you look at the two, in my head, the two demographics of people that might be interested in the Watch Dogs, right? Like you might have that person that is like, I want a punky open world city game with story and all this stuff. And it's like Cyberpunk wins that battle every single time. Or you might have the other person that is like, I want a Ubisoft open world game that can go through and do checklists and do all this stuff. Totally. And Assassin's Creed is going to win that fight every single time. And so Watch Dogs really is in the Titanfall situation of, like Titanfall went up against Battlefield 1 and Call of Duty, and Titanfall 2, incredible game. Like there's nothing wrong with that game. That game, I think, is so many people's favorite shooter of this generation. But in the marketing space, just isn't going to stand a chance against the other two. And Watch Dogs 2 very much seems like it's going to be in the same situation.
And what worries me about it is because of how ambitious the game is. Mm-hmm. And it will only be, if it doesn't succeed, it will be seen as, it's the game's fault and we tried too much. And I don't think it's any fault of the game coming out. It's, what it is, Greg? It's John Stockton, Tomahawk John Stockton playing in the same era as Jordan. You know what I mean?
Great support player.
Yeah. It's just too, and it sucks because I love that they're taking this risk on this franchise and you got to understand, like making a game like this that's that ambitious with that many moving parts, with any civilian being somebody that you can recruit. Yeah, that's such a tall task when it comes to just work hours and employees and wages, and like this game has to have cost a shit ton of money to make, and it has to succeed. I think
there's a very high likelihood this could easily be the last Watch Dogs.
And if it doesn't, then if it doesn't, then all that goes down the drain. Goes down the drain.
Yeah. So and Greg, I see a lot of people in chat talking about how it'll be on sale right away, right? In the same way Watch Dogs 2, if you remember, didn't perform and then got discounted right away and all those things. I could see that same thing happening here, sadly. Again, from what I played of Legions, again, I'm a Watch Dogs fan. What I played of Legions, I think they open it really strong, giving you a reason for what's happening here. And then, the under the hood shit of going through and controlling all these different people is also awesome and rad. However, as me and Barrett talk about in our reaction or first impressions, like it is this conversation of, but it does feel like Watch Dogs 2. Like the combat and everything else does feel like Watch Dogs 2. And, granted, these are the concessions you make, again, to Andy's point of having, the ability to control anyone in the world, and everyone has a backstory and all these different things, like, jumping off the roof at one point in the mission. And they did like a Assassin's Creed homage to, the Trust Fall that now I'm forgetting. Damn it, Barrett forgot it. Leap of Faith.
The Eagle Fall? Leap of Faith.
Doing a Leap of Faith. And it was like, oh, wow, this doesn't look that great like animation or visual wise, right? But of course it's because they've gone through and done all of London and done all these characters and done all these things, which makes it something to itself. I think it's going to be a fun, super nerdy game that nerds like me will get into and tinker with and build a certain team and have certain people in your toy box. You want to go do it, but I think it will get overshadowed by Assassins, and I think it will get overshadowed by Cyberpunk in terms of, hey, I want a single player narrative experience.
And that's what's weird to me is like it looks like they're kind of pitching it as if it is this big single player experience in the vein of Assassin's Creed, but the gameplay they're showing and everything they've shown kind of reminds me more of an amalgamation of a bunch of different type of games, but kind of like the open world sandboxy, just like fuck it, you don't need to do missions, just have fun with it, of Grand Theft Auto, combined with the kind of here you're just in this sandbox you can tackle things a billion different ways of like Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes, specifically Ground Zeroes part.
Sure.
Mixed with Hitman, where it's just like, again, different ways to go in and do different missions, but like
And
it seems like a weird thing to, instead of focusing on those core elements where it's just like, cool, this isn't a crazy ass narrative based game like with the single player campaign that they're pitching it as. It's more of just like it's about the gameplay, and it's about, here's the worlds you're in, do different things in that not small world, but like dense world, right? Is it like that, Greg, or does it feel like it's Watch Dogs 2, just now you can play as a bunch of different characters?
Well,
And
it's
there's
what
graffiti.
See, that's the thing, is that they've solved, I think, the biggest problem of Watch Dogs 2. Like Watch Dogs 2, and I talk about it in the thing, and I've talked about it obviously on a million different programs, right? Had this narrative dissonance to it, where it was that we're Marcus and we're cool DedSec people, and we dress really cool, and we have all these cool paint things, and we get together and we watch trailers and all this stuff. And that worked for me, and I loved it. And I loved this goofy San Francisco, and I loved goofy DedSec, and I loved doing goofy things. And I always tell that story of getting into a party where I was playing it, and so was Mitch Dyer and our friend James, and Mitch talking about rubber bullets. And I was like, oh, I haven't unlocked those yet. And he's like, oh, no, like I don't really have rubber bullets. I just needed to make up a reason in my head why Marcus and DedSec would be blowing people away on the streets. And I was like, oh shit, like I never played the game that way. Marcus walks up to an objective and sits down outside, opens his laptop, and hacks everything. That's how I chose to play it. Watch Dogs 2 had this goofy neon San Francisco story that then had the gameplay in it where you could go kill all these people and use all these things, but that didn't work in a narrative level, and yet So taking the gameplay that was solid for Watch Dogs and putting it into Legion and wrapping it into this thing of, hey, as I say in the video, like DedSec's grown up. Like DedSec's been framed for a terror attack in London, and now like a true evil in Albion has moved in, and there's still goofy characters and paint stuff, and like I was a beekeeper at one point. Like there's all this goofy shit in there, but they're giving it a real story and really grounding it and making it a real resistance. And that's the same thing of, I've seen headlines going around. One of the things when I was trying to talk about this bold stuff, right, is there's a preview up here from Michael Hyam on GameSpot. Watch Dogs Legion is unmistakably political, and it needs to follow through. And then they also have this interview with Clint Hawking over there, right, of embracing its political themes. These posted with the embargo, so I haven't had a chance to read them, but clearly I think they are taking this stuff head on. Like the resistance movement and everything that's going on there, even the trailer you just watched, right, has all that in there, which I think with this, hey, we're growing DedSec up, solves the problem of Watch Dogs 2, where when I originally got the game pitched to me and we saw the original trailers, I was like, I'm going to have a team of grannies. I'm just going to have a team of grannies out there doing all that shit. And playing it and watching it again, I'm like, no, fuck, dude, I'm actually going to play this like in Ocean's 11, where I am going to recruit people with specific things so they can go into specific places and do whatever the mission is I need them to do, right? Like the difference in me of playing as this computer hacker, this graffiti artist like Cool Greg, and this MI6 operative that I had, I was like, oh shit, like there's super varied stuff here that I actually want to explore and see what those systems are.
That's interesting, because I feel like watching it, there's a different type of dissonance as opposed to Watch Dogs 2, where this is kind of style versus substance, where especially starting off with this very Spider-Verse-esque trailer.
Yeah.
And sure, the narrative parts of that were pretty serious and dealing with serious subjects, but it was kind of always done in a tongue-in-cheek, jokey way that was cool as fuck to look at. And then when it cuts to the gameplay bits we saw, even with all the rewinding and like, well, here's how else you could do it, there was still an undertone of kind of tongue-in-cheek, kind of like, oh, it's funny that you're a construction worker. And like, there's the focus of, yes, you can actually use their abilities and the skills that those people would have in a, unique way that makes them the right person for the job. But I don't know, there's something about it that always feels like it has the sense of like, but it's funny though.
I agree with you. I think the trailer, and like the voiceover for the walkthrough gave you that impression. And like when I had the construction worker, right, what I did with my construction worker was used it to quietly infiltrate a construction site, get out a hostage, and get out. I never fucking knew he could shoot a nail gun as a real gun and all that stuff, because why would you ever do, like, I'm using him very specifically in a way. But granted, not every gamer is going to do that, and it's going to be these different things. And how do you present that? I don't know. And I think that is the push and pull of this identity they're wrestling with. You hope that you pair that kind of trailer where not everybody, but most of us like, oh my God, that looks awesome. Oh my God, John Wick, which I did not realize there was a hitman that could do that kind of shit. Like, I want that guy on my team. You pair that with hopefully the previews that are coming out now, where it's like, okay, well, there's this London attack and you're doing this, and now you have to have this resistance that still is tongue in cheek. It still is neon colors. It still is a granny making a joke when she has to or whatever. But like, has this more serious tone to it that I think was lost in Watch Dogs 2, as it was like, let's steal a trailer, let's infiltrate Google. Like, it wasn't like life and death all the time.
Tongue and cheeky is what you guys are probably meaning to say.
Hey.
Greg,
And-
when you were going in those missions really quick, were you also able to have one of your teammates with you, or is it only just the one dude you're controlling?
The missions I played were all, I'm in charge of one person and we were going to do the mission. You could still change at any time. And like, when you're free roaming and you change to a different person, they might put you anywhere in the city where that person's living their life. When it was, hey, I've taken a mission objective, like I wasn't the construction worker when I took that mission, and I was like, oh, it's a construction site. Switch to construction worker, who they were like, we're always going to put them just a block or two away so that it's easier for them to get to when you're on like an actual objective.
I got a question for all of you guys. So for me, both or all three, Far Cry, Assassin's Creed, and Watch Dogs, not typically my type of game. These trailers, these gameplay showings, these everything that they showed here, Watch Dogs didn't tell me in a way that I'm like, convince me to want to play.
Sure.
Assassin's Creed, same thing. Far Cry, even though we didn't see gameplay or anything, I'm like, I'm liking what I'm seeing here. I like the focus on these actors. I like the colors. They're colors like we haven't really seen. It's, of course, we love our blue and purple and all that stuff, but I liked this kind of different style we got going on here. And I'm like, that got me more interested of, damn, I need to know who this Voss guy is. Like, I never played Far Cry 4. Like, should I go back and play? For you guys, what? Oh, 3? Okay, yeah, 3. For you guys, what with those 3 franchises? And I mean, we know, Greg, where you're at with this stuff, but so I guess Bless and Andy, like, did these convince you otherwise for things that you don't normally play, or where you at?
Watch Dogs convinced me. Assassin's Creed convinced me. Far Cry, I think, has a lot of way to go in terms of getting me in, because I like Giancarlo Esposito as the villain character. I think that's really exciting. I like the piece they did with him and his son and the grenade shit. Like, all that stuff was really cool. But I've kind of been through this motion before with Far Cry 5 and Far Cry 4, where both of those villains and the trailers that came with those villains really had me excited for the prospect of playing those games. Especially for me as somebody who really liked Far Cry 3. Like, Far Cry 3 is probably one of my favorite games of last gen. But Far Cry 4 and Far Cry 5 especially fell flat for me. Like, and me and Greg actually talked about this on one of the shows this last week, where I know for me, it was probably like 5 to 7 hours in to playing Far Cry 5, where I was like, all right, I keep getting attacked by all these characters. I keep getting stopped whenever I try to go do a thing. This open world doesn't seem like that much of a step forward from previous Far Cries I've played. And like, I think the thing that Far Cry 6 will need to do would be to sell me on how you are forwarding the Far Cry franchise, as opposed to just being a new skin on top of what we've gotten so far. And so, yeah, to your question, like, Watch Dogs, really exciting for all the reasons we just talked about, especially the playing as different characters and the systematic and style of all that stuff. Stuff seems cool. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, for me, as somebody who's not historically an Assassin's Creed person, I've been wanting to get back to Assassin's Creed. And I've been looking for an excuse to get back to Assassin's Creed, and everything we saw in the Valhalla trailer kind of spoke to me, especially right now, because I'm kind of in the mood to play something that is like open world, that is that kind of game. And so, yeah, for those reasons, I'm totally down for those 2 games. But Far Cry, I'm still waiting to be sold.
Andy, you always talk about how Assassin's Creed is something you always want to get into. Do you think this is finally gonna be the one?
I don't know, man. I'm definitely going to try a lot harder to get into that game more than I will with Watch Dogs. I'll say that. I'm going to give it more of an effort than Watch Dogs. And I think I love the idea of these raids seem really interesting. Obviously the combat, having all these different combat styles seems really, really fun. I don't know. It's and obviously, you know, as somebody who loved God of War and just, you know, sort of Viking and, you know, I don't know if there will be any mythology attached to any of this or whatever, but it all seems cool, and I'm definitely into it. Watch Dogs less so. Far Cry 6 I will absolutely play, and I'm really excited for it. But I agree with Blessing, where I feel like, as somebody who doesn't have this huge past with Far Cry, I still feel like every new Far Cry feels like an expansion of the last Far Cry, whether it's, you know, again, just a new skin, or it's like Blood Dragon but longer. Like, I feel like they're all we do need to see what next gen Far Cry really looks like, and how how is it going to differentiate itself? It's always fun for me though. It's all like Far Cry is always fun. You're always going to have silly ass villains chasing you and crazy animals and new ways to explode things and attach C4s to stuff. Like it's always this big playground and it's always a blast. But when it comes to whether I'll get into Watch Dogs, that remains to be seen.
So with Far Cry, obviously I'm a bigger noob than the rest of you guys. Like, I'm a little surprised they're calling this Far Cry 6, especially, seeing the trend the last couple games. It seemed that it was like, okay, cool, here's 3, there's 4, but then there was Primal, right? And then when we got Far Cry 5, it was a very different thing. Now seeing 6 so soon after 5, and it seemingly being a prequel, sequel, whatever the hell it is,
well, there was
3.
the other one too. What's the Far Cry they did that was set in that post-apocalyptic future of Far Cry 5?
It's the one that
Horizon, something like that.
New
Like
Dawn.
that.
Far Cry
Yeah, Far Cry New Dawn.
Also,
yeah,
that was a
Exactly.
direct sequel to Far Cry 5, right?
correct.
Yeah.
That was the alternate ending, right? That if you failed or whatever,
Yeah,
Does
we
Does
don't
it
know for
surprise you
sure yet.
guys that they're calling
Well,
this 6?
We don't
Sorry,
know
what
for
was that
sure
thing?
yet that it's a prequel. That's still like speculation on our side. But even so, like I think it makes sense that they're calling it Far Cry 6. Like they seem to have a pattern of, hey, yeah, let's put out a numbered sequel, then put out some
DLC,
sort of
yeah.
DLC or expansion or
Yeah, I was
spin-off
going to say
of that
a
one.
not full-blown one, right? Because it was Far Cry 3, Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, Far Cry 4, Far Cry Primal, Far Cry 5,
Yes.
Far Cry New Dawn.
Yeah. And like usually the subtitled ones will be a lower. I believe like Far Cry New Dawn was like $40 or something when it came out. I think, maybe correct me on that if I'm wrong. But at the very least, like also, yeah, Far Cry New Dawn was a sequel to Far Cry 5 pretty much, and I'm pretty sure it was working off a lot of the same assets and the same map and stuff. Far Cry Primal, I know like a big complaint people had with Far Cry Primal was it was basically the same map from Far Cry 4, but just like restylized or retextured or whatever. For these numbered sequels, they seem to be very derivative, but for the most part brand new in terms of story and in terms of location and assets, and so like it makes sense. Like it's not necessarily surprising by any means.
I guess
think
like
Kevin-
I've been watching Narcos, so I'm just super into Far Cry 6. Like I love the vibe, and of course I love Giancarlo Esposito. Now hopefully we get to see him in a much bigger way than we do in even Far Cry 5 with Joseph Seed, who the main bad guy was, where he'll pop up in a cutscene or every now and then, but it's mostly just him talking to you like over speakers, or you hear him talking to other camps or whatever. Like I feel like in order for Giancarlo Esposito to be sort of the big face of this, the big villain, we're going to need him to be a lot more present.
Sure. In more Far Cry 6 news here, I sent it to Kevin. Far Cry 6 pre-order stuff is all up right now, and if you pre-order now, you can get access to Libertad Chorizo, who looks to be a wiener dog who's in one of those wheelchairs where his back legs don't work. He looks like small, and he's got like a bunch of stuff to shoot and attack.
That's
and
a
fight
real
with.
dog?
I mean, no, that's a video game dog. It's a video game dog.
No,
It's not a real dog.
No, I mean like no,
Yeah, elaborate.
I mean,
please.
like,
What do you
that's
mean?
I mean, like, that's not a toy dog in their world. That's like a real dog in their world.
No, that's a wiener dog in one of the back wheelchair things that you can get for them when they hurt their backs.
Pre-order now, get a real dog.
Get a real dog.
They're trying their best to get me in. Maybe they get a porty alt skin.
Dude, I love that. Let's get it going.
Even though Libertad Chorizo seems to be going over like a lead balloon right now on Twitter, so we'll see how that goes.
Oh.
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of talk about, the depiction of Latin American countries.
Well, I mean, I think that I've been seeing lately too, and I don't really have an opinion on this because I'm not super tuned in. But like I saw some people complain about the fact that this is like very much like a Latin American type of game, or I guess Latin American kind of game. And Giancarlo Esposito is very European, but he often portrays Hispanic characters, which we've kind of talked about this a little bit in some cases as far as what the conversation has been with actors portraying characters that don't necessarily line up with their identity. Like we've been seeing like a lot of voice actors step down from cartoons and different things like that because they're playing a black actor or they're playing a black character and they're not black, stuff like that. And so I don't really have any opinion on the specific case because this seems like such a specific thing that's not affecting me. But I have seen some conversation around that stuff too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in
Yeah,
between.
for me with Far Cry 6, just a quick one. It's just I have Far Cry burnout right now. Like you know what I mean? Ever since Far Cry 3 really hit for me, since then it's been like the just less and less and less enjoyment out of each one. Where Far Cry 5, I had to put down. So for me to get it, even be excited for Far Cry 6, they're gonna have to really explain why it's super different and cool.
Does it to you guys? Does this feel like cash-y at all? Because like to me, it kind of does, and it seems like there's
Far Cry
higher
6?
production. Yeah, like it just seems like they're taking advantage of like, and again, business is business. I get it, but it's like cool. Early 2021, people have the new consoles. That's when they're going to be wanting to play a game. Like, oh, we got to have a Far Cry there. Like that's why I'm kind of surprised that it's actually numbered.
No, it doesn't feel cash in it because like when has a Far Cry not felt like this? Like it,
And I guess that's a good point. Yeah, and
yeah.
then,
Like
yeah,
if
that's kinda where I'm
this
at,
one
too.
feels cash-y, then all the other ones have sort of felt like that because they've always been like these annual to not every year and a half sort of releases. It feels like because Far
Yeah.
Cry 5 was 2018, and New
Yeah.
Dawn was a little bit after that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like it's just their formula. I feel like they are sticking to their formula because it does numbers.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, like to be clear, like Far Cry 3 came out in 2012, Blood Dragon came out in 2013, Far Cry 4 2014. So that was like the kind of the same lineup as far as it coming out the year after a console launches, and then yeah, Far Cry Primal 2016, 5 2018, New Dawn 2019, and 6 2021.
Greg Miller.
Yeah, but
Next time you're interviewing somebody of
Sure.
consequence over at Ubisoft, can you ask them if they could change things and do things the way they wanted? Would they have it so that Assassin's Creed and Watch Dogs would be alternating years? Because that seems way better. That seems just way smarter, right? Especially
Yeah.
now Assassin's Creed's on.
Well,
a
remember that
2-year
was the
cycle.
thing with Legion, where it's been pushed around a bunch, right? Like, it's been
Yeah, Legion was supposed to
yeah.
come out in February, and
Yeah.
like to me, the way the way they would want it in an ideal world would be for it to be Assassin's Creed, Watch Dogs, Assassin's Creed, Watch Dogs in that cadence, because we get to Assassin's Creed and then you're off, and it seems like those would be the perfect like alternating games in that sense, where Assassin's Creed is more popular and more successful overall, and so like you'd want those to maybe give each other a little bit of breathing room, with Watch Dogs being the off year.
So besides the big three things from this, was there anything that got you guys going?
Can't wait for Valhalla on mobile.
I'm excited for
Elite
Hyperscape.
Squad, baby. Yeah,
I'll be-
Hyperscape. I'm really excited for.
Yeah, I'll be hopping into Hyperscape quite a bit. Once I started playing with Snowbike Mike and his crew, Washburn was there as well. But when you first hop into that game, I don't recommend playing alone. I feel like it's a game you absolutely need people to play with because you are so reliant on your player getting better with your team calling out upgrades. So the way it works, Tim, is if I have this shotgun, every weapon has 4 levels of upgrades, and in order to upgrade it, you just find a duplicate of that weapon. So once we all knew what we were using, I would call out, I'm using this sniper and I'm using this machine gun. So they'd go, okay, we know that. Now, what hacks are you using? And the hacks are the abilities like Blink, which is like Tracer's teleport or whatever. There's one where you could just go invisible for several seconds, and those all have upgrades as well by just finding duplicates of themselves. And it became really, really cool to have this rhythm with a set squad where you go, this is what I'm using. And they'd be in another building and go, hey, I found this gun over here, found this upgrade over here. So you'd run over there, upgrade them. Because if you don't have those upgrades early on, you're just going to get shit on by another team that has upgraded weapons because they just put out a lot higher damage per second, or their abilities. Like there's a slam ability where you just go up into the sky and you come down and you sort of do this AoE attack, ground pound. And when that's overpowered, it's pretty disastrous if you don't really have a whole lot to defend it with. So yeah, playing with a set squad was awesome, and it was fun having all these upgrades. And once we started getting into that rhythm, it became a blast to the point where I really wanted to play with Blessing this past week, but the closed beta had ended the day before, and so I was legitimately bummed out about that. But we hopped into the Warzone and we fragged out. It was great. Me and Blessing,
Dude, this week now, man.
It was
this week
awesome.
we can play.
But I'm super stoked to hop back in and knowing what I know now and how the game works. I think it's really unique, and I think it feels like one of these. It feels like something that Ubisoft, like a truly unique effort, where every other thing that they've sort of done recently is always just a sequel of itself with some added mechanics here and there. But this feels like, yes, we know there's a lot of battle royales out there, but here's our spin on it, and there are so many new characteristics to it that differentiate it from a lot of other battle royales out there, and it's legitimately fun. It's really fun.
I mean, for me, I think with the changes we're seeing to the Ubisoft editorial team, this kind of feels like that last wave of like the impact of that editorial team, if that makes sense. So like us getting Far Cry 6 feeling like it is this derivative thing, and like, you know, Watch Dogs and Assassin's Creed and like this traditional Ubisoft lineup. I'm curious to see how long this stays before it starts to dissipate, because Assassin's Creed is something we're probably going to get forever at this point. But within
they did pump the brakes. Remember when it stopped selling? When they had made that statement, we will keep making these as long as you keep buying them. And then like 2 years later, people stopped buying. Like, all right, we're going to take some time off. Origins, Odyssey. Now Valhalla.
In 2 to 3 years, I think the catalog is going to look a lot more fresh and different, though, which I'm really excited and curious to see.
That's what's mind blowing to me, though. Blessing is like to go on Greg's point where they made that statement, and it felt like it was maybe 2 years ago that 3 years ago that they said that, and since then we're getting 3 like Assassin's Creed games. Like that's so nuts, because it felt like they were making like a strong stand. Okay, guys, we heard you. We're not doing them annualized anymore. Let's do them once every other year. But I mean, we're getting the third one in the last 3 years since they said that. Like, it's crazy.
But well, in a sense, they kind of keep duping us too, because in the beginning of the year, I think that was the news story we got from Ubisoft, where it was like, hey, we're restructuring the editorial team and all this different stuff, and we talked about it. I think like everybody was pretty excited about it, but then you look at the you look at the editorial team now, what it has been, and it's like, oh, like you guys said you're restructuring it, but it's a sea of white faces, and it is still led by the same dude who, for all intents and purposes, keeps greenlighting the same game over and over and over again. And so now, like, that dude at the top is gone. And so that then means, and who knows, like maybe the people that rise up will have the same taste as he does, or will continue status quo. But you would hope that, now that with Surge and like some of the other higher ups gone, you'll now see games come out that are not that, like that aren't the same game over and over again.
Dude, one of the things interesting to say, I think, is I think that we fall a little bit into the trap, and I forget if it was an old Gamescast thing. I don't know if it was you, Tim, or if it was Colin, or if it was somebody else, but talking about Mario games and how they keep putting out Mario games, but in a way that's a misnomer. Is one Mario game is 2D, one Mario game is 3D.
Yeah,
blah, blah, blah,
that
blah.
was me. There's the 2D, there's 3D, and then there's the 3D 2D that's actually called 3D, which is very...
Barrett was describing an interesting way when we were doing the Assassin's Creed Valhalla reaction or first impression. That was like, he kept describing since Origins like new Assassin's Creed, right? Like they obviously had been annualizing. They stopped. They took time off. They came back with Origins, with people pretty much universally loved. Then they did Odyssey, which started to separate the crew into terms of this is too bloated. It's too RPG. I don't, blah, blah, blah. But it still sold really well. And I fucking adored, right? And it's the same thing here where I'm seeing, what I can in Twitter reactions to Valhalla and stuff. I think it's important to point out that like, Valhalla feels, at least in the 3.5 hours I played of it, different than Odyssey. Like it is, and it is very much like one of the things that excited me about Odyssey was that exploration mode, right? Where in the beginning it was like, do you want it to be classic Assassin's Creed where you accept the quest text pops up, there's a big fucking marker on where to go, or do you want this exploration thing that is, you're looking for a man in the northwest part of this map and in closer to this town, but to like that kind of thing. Valhalla, like for real, from what I played, default whatever in there, they didn't mention anything about exploration, feels like a Viking RPG. It doesn't feel like an Assassin's Creed thing in the way that like you open your map and there are 3 different colors of icons on it and you hover over it and you can drop a waypoint on it, but it doesn't tell you shit about what it is. You walk, the example I do is like, there was one that's blue, which means mystery, right? I dropped it. I walked to this giant church. I walked in, there was a woman, a nun tending to some candles, and I was like, started the conversation. I'm like, hey, what's up, kind of thing, blah blah blah. And she turned around, she's like, oh, you're one of those Vikings. You're like, I'm like, yeah, I'm one of those Vikings people. Blah blah. She's like, well, blah blah blah. You have to fucking die. And she pulled out dual wielding weapons and came at me. And I was like, oh my fucking god, like. There is this sense of discovery in it that is the escalation of what I loved about Odyssey. The camera angle is different. The combat feels different. You're unlocking, the abilities, the special abilities you use, not in the, hey, I've earned a skill point. Where can I go put it to get those unlocked? You have to find books of knowledge and find then matching books of knowledge to upgrade that one. You're on a quest for those. You do have the ability to, unlock new moves and then augment your abilities through the star chart, but you're very much picking which one do you want to go and invest your abilities in. Like the HUD is minimal. They showed it real briefly in there, but we were chatting over it, of course. Like the way healing works in this now is that you have to procure on site. Like you're out there, like after a battle, you don't heal. You need to find the plants you're finding that I was in Odyssey, just fucking smashing the button on and get going and then upgrading whatever the fuck I was upgrading hours later. Now is actually crucial to in the middle of a boss fight. I was getting my ass kicked and it was dodge roll around, find stuff, put it into my satchel, start using it, start trying to heal, start trying to get a background to it. Like the game obviously feels and looks like Assassin's Creed to an extent, but it feels different as well in a way that I'm super psyched for, and I know that other people won't be. They are taking a chance with the way they're going with that.
So with that, it's interesting. I already know the answer is because it's Assassin's Creed and that sells, but why not call it something else? Like, why not kind of create this to be a different franchise that doesn't need to have the ties to the Animus and ties to all this other stuff? Because like what you're talking about, Origins and Odyssey, like we've all seen kind of the different receptions of those games.
Yeah.
And I think that a big part of that is it just sounds similar, where it's like O names as the subtitle. It just kind of feels like, oh, here's another. And, Andy's point of them coming so close together, it's like, it wasn't literally 3 years in a row, but like it does feel that
feels
way.
like it.
It just feels like Assassin's Creed might as well be annualized at this point. And that, why not bring in a different type of game? And like, especially with what you're talking about, Greg, of this being kind of a more RPG type thing, even if you want to keep the Assassin's Creed name, Assassin's Creed something, subtitle, something else, like to actually have those branches that are a little bit more clear, so that something that can be a little more narrative focused, like a Prince of Persia, can actually happen, and have these off cycles and whatever.
Why not?
Yeah.
I think it's complicated. I think it's also, in terms of having an Assassin's Creed subtitle, then another title to it and stuff, like you start branching. I understand what you're saying of Assassin's Creed RPG, Valhalla, right? Or Vikings or whatever. And breaking out that way, I think it is just doubling down. I think it also is in a lot of ways Ubisoft, for better or worse, saying, cool, this is what Assassin's Creed is now. Like, we're slowly weaning you off the Animus and stuff like that. There are parts to it. God only knows how to play in this. What's interesting about the way they're doing in Assassin's Creed Valhalla is the Animus is there, and the only thing I could do to use it, the only way I used it in the gameplay that was very much obviously a vertical slice of everything you can do in it, is that when you go into it, you can switch between male and female Eivor whenever you want. So you don't have to like be committed to one if you don't like it, or switch around. You can get a feel for both of them as you go. And I guess from one of the headlines I saw on Twitter is, I guess that plays into a mystery in the game of actually who Eivor is or whatever. Like, I think it's the idea of like, the series itself is something they want to experiment with and they want to move to. And I think, again, maybe it's that back to what we talk about all the time with games, right? Of the vocal minority, that there's a lot of people who are like, bah, Odyssey had too much bloat. I didn't like the RPG of it. And I'm sure they look at sales and go, well, these millions and millions and millions of people seem to, and they all bought fucking DLC for it, and they all spent Helix credits on new goddamn unicorn skins for Phobos. So we're not worried about that. We are going to do this, and we are going to take these chances.
We also did have games like Assassin's Creed Origins China, and like we did have those spin-off games that were Assassin's Creed but different types of games. And I think the Assassin's Creed stuff is interesting as far as how Assassin's Creed has grown and changed. But the thing I will say is that I think that growth and change has come through necessity as opposed to like, inspired change. And that sounds very negative, because I don't want to say that like, the devs weren't out there being super creative in the ways they were changing it.
Sure.
But I don't think Assassin's Creed would have changed if Assassin's Creed kept selling. Like, I think it would have been business as usual in terms of what those games would have kept on being. And I think like with Assassin's Creed, like these are what the Assassin's Creed games are now, which is really exciting for Assassin's Creed fans and really exciting for people who see that and are interested in that. But I still think that does reflect on what the rest of the portfolio looks like. Like, we have Assassin's Creed, which is allowed to grow and develop because it is that core franchise for Ubisoft, and it is this game that needs to be successful by any means necessary. But then you have games like Watch Dogs, which, I mean, for all intents and purposes, like does also seem like it's evolving in cool ways, and we'll really see when it comes out how much the stuff matters. But it's still pretty much Watch Dogs. Then you have Far Cry, which is basically, as far as we understand, more Far Cry. And I feel like you can kind of take that and extrapolate it through pretty much everything else going on at Ubisoft. Like if Ubisoft today announced a new Tom Clancy game, in my mind, I know what that game looks like, or I know I know what that game possibly looks like. Like it is probably something that is going to be Division-like, where it is loot based, where it is you're going around an open world with friends, or it might be something that is like, I don't know, man, Rainbow Six, or like
Elite Squad.
Elite Squad. There are these buckets that you put Ubisoft games into, and on one hand, like you kind of get it. They're a company,
It works.
like it works. You know, they're a third party publisher, and so there's only so much they can do, and there's only so much new they can make without it being a huge risk for them. But at a certain point, I feel like that kind of starts making their whole catalog come off as stale, which I think is going to stop happening now. I would hope would stop happening now.
Do you think at the next event we hear about quarantine and whether they change the name?
Yes.
The one later this year.
Yeah.
I think that we'll hear about Quarantine. I think we'll hear about Gods and Monsters, and we'll go from there. Again, a thing to give credit to Ubisoft for this forward was they didn't overhype it. Like everything I've seen for this was just kind of like we're taking a look at our games.
That's
and
true.
Had Far Cry not leaked, that would have been an exciting thing. It did leak. It was still cool and exciting. So it's like I think this was what it was, and more so than a lot of the other guys, I think that they kind of set the expectations correctly for us to not feel disappointed. I don't think any of us feel disappointed by this. We're not, jumping up and down, freaking out about it, but it was just kind of like, cool, that was what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not angry gamer about it. Like I'm not like, how dare they, pull the wool over our eyes or whatever.
Well, if you were though, Bless, we might get more clicks.
I mean,
Think about it.
Damn, where's my Splinter Cell, Ubisoft? How dare you?
Any closing thoughts on this, guys?
Nah.
I wasn't like hyped for this. I was excited to hang out and talk about games and see stuff, but I wasn't hyped for this like I would be for an E3 presentation. And so I'm like, no, this is what I expected.
Show me guys monsters.
In the sense of that though, Greg, let's compare it to other Ubisoft presentations. I would say this is a lot better than some of them.
We didn't get the dance break. You know what I mean? I couldn't. Aisha Tyler needs to just be like, even if she's not in it, she has like some interstitial in it where she walks by in the background. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I think this one is any better than any of the previous ones. Like I would say compared to previous Ubisoft presentations at E3, this one I would say is way underwhelming compared. But like I also give them that room because they said there's another event coming. Like if this was an E3 presentation with just these announcements, I would have been like, all right.
My counterpoint to that is it was 45 minutes. We got 3 major release dates, and we didn't get the traditional, here's a trailer, here's some gameplay, here's an interview, like over and over and over in a bloated 2.5 hour thing that may have a surprise or two that's actually cool and exciting and new. But like at least this, we got some good info, even if it was info that's not necessarily exciting.
Yeah, I was like the only new game we got was a game that we could have all expected. And even if Far Cry hadn't leaked, like if a new Far Cry was announced, I don't think anybody's like jumping out their seat like, oh snap, they're bringing Far Cry back. And so like
I never saw it coming.
Whoa, never could see this coming. But like previous Ubisoft conferences, we've gotten stuff that is Ghost Recon Breakpoint, which I know isn't super exciting, but for it's pretty much a new game that I don't think many people could have seen coming. We got things like
I disagree with that,
2,
especially
and
after
like
Wildlands. It like Breakpoint just felt like another Wildlands, and if Breakpoint did well, we'd see another one now.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Breakpoint kind of hit different for me because I think so close after Wildlands, it felt like something new and different, especially with Punisher. I can't remember his name right now.
John Bernthal.
John Bernthal, yes. Like that kind of had me excited. And like I feel like we got so much new stuff compared. Like even stuff like Roller Champions and Ghost Recon, or not Ghost Recon, Rainbow Six Quarantine and stuff like that. I know it's all small stuff, but I'm kind of fine with 4 all right announcements, like new announcements, as opposed to one Far Cry.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been our reaction to the first ever Ubisoft Forward. Stay tuned for the rest of the Summer Game Mass, where we will be reacting to all of the rest of the conferences that happen right here on twitch.tv/kindoffunnygames live, youtube.com/kindoffunnygames later, podcast services. Greg Miller from Kind of Funny. What's up?
I just want to point out, and I'm sure you're going to do it anyway, but just in case, that remember, this isn't the only Gamescast you'll get this week. We are, in fact, doing our Ghost of Tsushima review Tuesday, 7 a.m.
Exactly. YouTube.com/kindoffunnygames is popping off right now. A whole bunch of stuff, like we said earlier. Greg and Barrett did some combination of playing Watch Dogs Legion and Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Their first impressions are up there. Like we said earlier, there's a podcast feed just for our first impressions. Just search for Kind of Funny First Impressions on your favorite podcast service as well. We'll be there for you. Andy's full playthrough of The Last of Us Part 2 will be completely uploaded by tomorrow.
It's
right
in like
it's
an
today,
hour.
isn't it?
Oh, in an hour. Cool.
Oh,
Fantastic.
yeah.
The entire game, the end. Let's see how it all goes down. But anyways, thank you guys for joining us here live, later. Doesn't matter. We love you. We respect you. Bye, guys.